has to do with the class this morning. If y'all want to get that, there's 4 different things back there. Or I can have somebody come around. Yeah, there's 4 things. You grab one. I saw you coming down with one. There's actually 4 different ones. I wasn't really certain how many people we had in this class here. So there's like 30 of each. So if there's not enough, you get some. And we run out of them. We're glad to make more copies of that if you want it. Ethan's getting his packet there. Yeah, that's the only one Jay would let. Yeah, that's the only one Jay would let me put up there. In the beginning of this, if everybody remembers, that in the beginning of this lesson, there was, of course, this book has an image of 3 women there and a snake behind them. A serpent they're just ready to strike it. And AI helped me out with my imagery that I put up there. And the first thing I showed, and Jay looking at it goes, "Why is there only 3 women?" And then I had to switch over to another side. Well, I got men in there involved too. Had 2 men around a coffee pot. But there was a serpent in every one of them. Every time you think about it, you just think about that sneaky serpent in behind that's just waiting to strike. And that we flirt with it. And I have a little bit more imagery about that this morning. But before we go to get started our lesson, we'll again think about the Weaver and Ring family and the passing of Jason this past week. And Charlie, we heard that he is moving about over there in Africa, so he is there. He is on the ground, hitting places over there. So glad that they made it safely and are, as far as I know, still making it safely around country over there. Let's go to our Father in prayer and begin our lesson this morning. Almighty God, the Father in heaven, so thankful for each and every day that you bless us with. Thankful, Father, that you put us on this earth to serve you. Put us on this earth to love one another. And Father, we just pray that as we go through this class and the things we talked about, the sins of the tongue and the heart and the gossip of what we can have amongst ourselves and amongst others outside of here, that Father, we would guard ourselves and guard the tongue, and knowing that it is a mighty weapon. Be with us this morning, Father, as we look into these things, and always help us, Father, to be better servants of yours. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. So, have you heard something? Let it die with you. Be brave. It will not make your heart burst. Having heard something, the fool suffers birth pains like a woman in a labor with a child. Like an arrow stuck in a person's thigh, so is gossip inside a fool. This writer, he reaches into several different, books and references and such. This one happened to be something from, I had to look it up myself. It's from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's something where it's some book that was found, and it just amazed me the references and different things, even people, and we've talked about, even I think last week, of a quote that came up with somebody that says, "I am not a Christian." He wrote a book like that, but he also talks about gossip being a problem in society, and problem with amongst our people, and you can imagine what it would do to us, even here. So I'm going back just a little bit and thinking of the sins connected with gossip and bringing out a couple of things. But I want to read something here that was in the last week's lesson, and it was just a little story. It says Mike Kicknap lived in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. One day, the 15-year-old was riding bike around his neighborhood. Excuse me. Neighborhood with his friends when he spotted a 2-foot-long snake, which they identified as a harmless king snake. They picked it up and began playing with it, since king snakes are not poisonous. Mike was mimicking the snake's tongue flicking action when the snake suddenly struck him and bit his tongue. It was at this moment that Mike discovered a terrible truth. The snake he and his friends had been playing with was not a harmless king snake, but an extremely deadly coral snake. Mike raced a quarter mile to his house on his bike, and his family called 911. When the first responders arrived, they found Mike in a desperate shape and rushed him to St. Mary's Medical Center in 13 minutes. His tongue was rapidly swelling, so the medical professionals quickly began to administer anti-venom to him and put a tube down his throat to preserve his airway. Mike spent several days in critical condition, but thankfully survived. Is this thing even on? Doesn't look like. Oop, here we go. Now it is. So if you don't like the sight of snakes, don't look at this one. Can you tell the difference? Just by quickly looking at it. All right, he knows the rhyme. Red on yellow, it says, red on black is a friend of Jack, red on yellow, kill a fella. How many people are going to stand there and try to remember that little nursery rhyme and trying to think about looking at this snake and how close you are to it before you decide that it's either going to be venomous and hurt you or not and not bother you at all? In my camp, I don't play with them, period. You it's why? Why do we even consider playing with something that we don't know will hurt us? Why would we consider playing with something that we potentially could hurt us? I know several people out there that pick up a rattlesnake just as soon as they pick up a rat snake or a chicken snake, which won't hurt you. But they'll pick it up because they know how to handle it. But at the same time, they've been struck by it. And I watched this show of this guy that he takes care of different reptiles, and he's got these massive, anacondas and boa constrictors and all these things, and they will bite. They will not venomous, but they will bite. And he still plays with them, still does stuff with them, but he suffers the consequences every once in a while when he gets bit. But I just think about, why do we do these things? Anybody got an answer? Because it's the thrill of it?
It's a thrill.
Yeah, okay. So, on that mind, I'm glad you said that. Because the medical mind to me says there's sometimes something scientific about it. This you will not find in the book. This is an extra for everybody. You have in your body what's called dopamine. It's in your brain. And it says a powerful and complex neurotransmitter in the brain that plays a critical role in motivation, reward, movement, and learning. It acts as a chemical messenger to facilitate communication between nerve cells, influencing how we think, move, remember, and behave. So, motivation and a goal-directed behavior. So dopamine is often referred to as the molecule of pursuit of pleasure rather than pleasure itself. That's the endorphin stuff. You get an endorphin rush whenever something is exciting to you. I mean, if you love roller coasters and you take that dive and that excites you, that's endorphins. It is that rush. But for me, that's a pleasure-seeking thing. I'd like to do it again. And dopamine says, go after it. All right? So rather than pleasure, it said it provides the drive and motivation to seek out rewarding experiences essential to survival behaviors like eating and reproduction. But when an action leads to a positive outcome, dopamine is released. which reinforces the connection between the action and the reward, making us want to repeat it again. So again, this reward and reinforcement learning. Dopamine is central to the brain's reward system. Bursts of dopamine act as teaching signals or a reward prediction error. So that tells the brain an event is important and needs to be remembered. This process is crucial for forming habits and learning which activities are beneficial. So how does dopamine play in gossip? Well, dopamine plays a significant role in human, propensity for gossip because gossiping activates the brain's reward system, releasing the neurotransmitter and creating a sense of pleasure or excitement. You said you get a thrill out of it. Well, gossiping in some sense gives us a thrill about it. It's exciting. We get this news. We talked about that Danny morsel that goes into your innermost parts. You want to do it again. And your brain is telling you, I want to do it again. This is great. This makes me feel good. So it takes do it one more time. This positive feeling reinforces behavior, making people likely to engage in it again. So again, the role in gossip, if you look in there, and I've got this again in your notes there if you had it with your dopamine response part of it, and reward and reinforcement. But the reward and reinforcement, so when people share or hear juicy or novel social information, the brain's reward centers, such as what they call the ventral, tegmental area, nucleus, all that good stuff, show increased activity, leading to release of dopamine. So this arousing and rewarding effect acts as an intrinsic reward for exchanging information and reinforces the habit, which can sometimes lead to a cycle that feels addictive. Our bodies are wired this way. Motivation for social information. The brain is wired to pay attention to important social information for survival. In ancestral times, knowing who to trust or who pose a threat was critical for well-being. The dopamine system, which drives motivation, provides the push to seek out and share this valuable social data, as it can provide an adaptive advantage. Social bonding. Sharing gossip can foster a sense of closeness and trust among those in the in-group. An effective further enhancement by the release of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. The dopamine reward makes this group connection feel good, serving as a social superglue. Social comparison and status. Hearing gossip, especially negative information about others, can provide an ego boost through social comparison, measuring one's own standing against others. The feeling of having insider knowledge or sense of superiority can also trigger dopamine release, reinforcing a desire for status or power within a social group. I got all this information just by leveraging a little AI. I asked it, what role, when it started to, and I found this in another part of, we're talking about dopamine release, said, what role does gossip play in this, as far as releasing that in the brain? And all these things are the exact same things we've already kind of referred to in the past few weeks. But not knowing that a lot of it is physical. I mean, it is physiologic in yourself, within your brain, to do these things. So in short, dopamine is a neurologic driver that makes the act of gossiping feel satisfying, linking an ancient survival mechanism to a modern social behavior. So it's almost like we're using it as a defense mechanism. It's telling us, your brain is wired to do this. Keep it up. They're like, wow, what's it going to, how can I combat this? It's such a strong drive for me to do it. How can I combat it? Well, I asked it the same question. What parts, what things, opposite of gossip, opposite of these things, would trigger the same response? So I said, every one of these points that you just made, tell me something I do to not do them, to get the same response, the same dopamine response, the same thing that tells me this is pleasurable, this was what I should do, and this is what I should do going forward. And the reward and reinforcement, talking about, speak words that build others up. Biblical principle, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. It comes from Ephesians 4:29. The effect, satisfaction and joy from helping others, altruism, reinforced, positive interactions, and a clear conscience. Doing this action as an opposition to the other produces the same dopamine response, the same pleasurable thing to do, because you're actually working with someone, helping somebody. The other one, social connection. The in-group bonding through shared secrets. Cultivate genuine, supportive fellowship and openness with fellow believers. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another, coming from Proverbs 27:17. Support each other. And it's got some verses that come from Proverbs 18:8. Stronger, more trusting relationships, sense of belonging, and the release of oxytocin, again, that pleasure, enhancing the reward of community. Novelty and excitement, new or hidden information. This one wasn't listed in the other, but said seek revelation of God through Scripture, meditation, prayer, and spiritual experiences. In it, all Scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching. And we know that comes from 2 Timothy 3:16-17. In your presence is fullness of joy, being with Him. Psalm 16 and verse 11. So the discovery of new spiritual insights are a sense of awe and a deeper relationship with God, which activates the brain's reward system. Status comparison. Said, practice humility, service, and focusing on others' interests above your own. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. Philippians 2:3-4. So the joy of serving boosts dopamine and serotonin and gaining respect through virtuous action rather than tearing others down, leading to true honor. And then idleness. When having nothing productive to do. Most people gossip because they just ain't got nothing better to do. They'd rather talk about somebody. Well, so engage in purposeful work, ministry, and good deeds. If anyone is unwilling to work, he shall not eat. That's 2 Thessalonians 3:10. But so whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. The dopamine release, the satisfaction and sense of accomplishment that comes from diligence, productivity, and serving God's purpose. Essentially, it says, by replacing the temptation to gossip with these intentional faith-based actions, one can fulfill the brain's natural need for social reward and stimulation in ways that honor God and build up the community. So we're not doomed to our own bodies and our own physiological makeup to do these things. There's a spiritual way to get around it. Doing the things that God tells us to do. It does the same thing to our brains and gives us the same reward, the same thing. But it's all what you choose. Excuse me. A serial killer, the first time he ever murdered someone, took pleasure in it. That's the reason he does it again. for a person that takes a drink of, alcohol. Found some pleasure in it. Dopamine release. They do it again because it feels good to them. The brain's telling them, hey, I like that. Go after some more. Now, the same thing, if it doesn't give you any kind of pleasure in doing it, it's not going to release that. It's not going to give you that signal to do it again. If I take a hammer and slam it on my thumb, it's not going to give me that dopamine release and tell me to go, oh, let's try that one more time. Let's hit the next finger and see if it feels just as good. It's not going to do that. But we have two different things here between somebody wanting to gossip and somebody wanting to build somebody up that will release the same thing. You got to choose. This is one thing that obviously is a definite choice. You can choose to gossip about somebody, or you can choose to do the other. Or you can choose to stare that snake in the face and take a tempt yourself about it and see how exciting that will be and what it may do to you. We spoke about last week, and the very last thing we come up with, we're talking about all these sins that were listed with gossip. And Betty says, she kind of says, which one excites you, or kind of, or that you look at that kind of makes you go, you said murder, right? Killing someone. What if the fact that gossip itself is not just listed in there because it's part of it, but can cause all of it? Sins born of gossip. You got this in front of you too. Too much to put on a slide. But this is how gossip would lend to and point to everything that we talked about in Romans 1, 28 through 32. And just reading it again, and since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. They know, though they know God's righteousness decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they do not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. Well, think of them on this end. Sins born of gossip, unrighteousness, and wickedness. It says gossip is inherently unrighteous as it violates the command to love your neighbor as yourself. It involves speaking ill of someone, whether true or false, which is an act of malice and a form of unrighteousness. So it's just not a sin associated in it, right in the middle of it. Gossip leads to this. Malice and maliciousness. Gossip is often motivated by a desire to harm someone's reputation or social standing, a direct manifestation of malice or ill will. Envy. We talked about jealousy as being a motivator. See, envy of another person's success, possessions, or relationships is a primary driver of gossip. People may try to hear or try to tear others down through rumors to make themselves feel better or to diminish the person they envy. And we're getting to murder. While seemingly extreme, the Bible often connects hatred and character assassination with murder. If you look in Matthew and 5 and 21, get back there. Yep, 5 and 21. You have heard that it is said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to the judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of the fire. Gossip can murder a person's reputation, social life, and emotional well-being. And intense hatred fueled by gossip can lead to physical violence. We're going to bring some other things up about that in here in just a minute. Strife and quarrels. Gossip is a known strife sower that separates close friends and causes division in communities or churches. It stirs up dissension and bitter conflict by spreading rumors and misinformation. I've got some things in there along with this. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but I've got two of them that you have in your handouts, and one in the back that has specifically to do with arrogance and strife. How one, gossip leads to arrogance, and then arrogance itself leads to gossip. Gossip leading to strife, and strife leading to the other. And how those two together, bounce off of one another. Excuse me. Deceit, and of course we're talking about malignity. Gossip often involves elements of deceit or a distortion of the truth. Even if rooted in truth, it presents a one-sided, often cruel narrative to malign, and that is to speak about someone in a spiteful, critical manner and malign their character. Slanderers and backbiters. So this is a direct sister sin to gossip, often used interchangeably in translations. Slander is speaking evil of someone, which is the very definition of malicious gossip. Haters of God. Engaging in gossip shows a lack of love for one's neighbor, which is the second great commandment. A consistent rejection of God's command to love others and a persistent indulgence in sins like gossip ultimately reflect a heart that is hostile toward God and His ways. Insolent, arrogant, and boastful. As noted previously, gossip can stem from a sense of superiority, the act of sharing exclusive negative information that can make a person feel powerful and important, feeding their pride and arrogance. They boast in knowing secrets or in the faults of others. Inventors of evil. Gossips can invent lies or new malicious ways to spread rumors, finding novel ways to cause harm when existing methods are insufficient to satisfy their malice. Heartless and unmerciful. Gossip is an act devoid of empathy and mercy. A person engaging in gossip fails to consider the pain and damage they are inflicting on the target, demonstrating a heartless or ruthless attitude. It says, in essence, gossip acts as a tool for the expression of these darker heart attitudes. The passage highlights how a mind that chooses to reject God is given over to a general moral decay, where even seemingly less severe sins like gossip are linked to the entire spectrum of human wickedness. So I'm going to bring out some things just, again, not listed in your book, but gossip in history. I think it's not something that would be very severe, right? And where it could lead to. We'll take a look at the Salem witch trials. I'm talking about murder. So the Salem witch trials are a quintessential early American example of how unverified gossip and mass hysteria can lead to tragedy. So the mechanism of a small group of young women made accusations of witchcraft, initially a gossip and a spectral evidence against socially vulnerable members of a community. And resulting of that, they arrested over 150 people, and out of that, 20 individuals were executed for sheer speculation that these women committed witchcraft. Pre-Civil War slave revolt panics. So in 1831, this is prior, like I say, again, prior to the Civil War, you got many people enslaved, and they're afraid they're going to revolt on them. So they start spreading rumors about this, talking about the Nat Turner Revolt. So these rumors often based on a collective of fears rather than facts. And from it, so the panics led to brutal vigilante justice, mass arrests, and the torture and execution of numerous enslaved people, often with little to no evidence of an actual plot. Many were lynched, many were killed, many were hunted down, brutalized, put to death. And this was before we even got into the Civil War. Spanish-American War. Sensationalist journalism, known as yellow journalism, used inflammatory and unverified reports to push the U.S. into war. So after the USS Maine battleship exploded in Havana Harbor, newspaper magnates like William Randolph Hearst used their papers to spread rumors and jump to the conclusion that Spain was responsible, using slogans like "Remember the Maine," "To hell with Spain." As a result, the barrage of misleading journalism and public outcry fueled by these rumors contributed significantly to the declaration of war against Spain. And even though the actual cause of the explosion was never definitively proven to be a Spanish attack, but we still went to war with them. McCarthyism, the Lavender Scare. During the Cold War, a culture of suspicion and fear of communist infiltration was perpetrated through accusations that often relied on gossip and innuendo. Senator Joseph McCarthy and others used substantiated claims and rumors to accuse thousands of individuals in government, academia, and the entertainment industry of being communist or homosexuals. The Lavender Scare linked to the belief that homosexuals were security risks. So these accusations often spread through informal channels, destroying countless careers and lives. People were blacklisted, lost jobs, faced severe social ostracism without due process, and demonstrating the power of rumor and gossip in a climate of fear. You think about political campaigns throughout the year. Our one, even most recent, with Trump and Biden, you got to know the things that are flying right now. You can think about what they're accusing of or thinking that, and you kind of look at it all the time. You remember, how many times did you ever see Biden on the camera in front of you really talking about any kind of, agenda that he had or anything that he was doing? He never made a camera appearance. Now they're thinking or saying that he never made a decision or signed anything himself ever. You ever heard of AutoPen? Well, they're thinking they used that to sign a bunch of stuff that he never even agreed to. We don't know that that's the case, but that's what they're putting out there for us to believe. And whether Trump did all the things that they tried to accuse him of and put him to court through and whatever like that, he still became our president. But these things are out there. They're all rumored. We do not have the information to prove any of it ourselves, but that's what's out there. And you're thinking of this, the only example they gave here of Grover Cleveland was that, in 1884 presidential campaign, where a rumor was, which may have been true, and it says which may have been true, spread around Democratic County Grover Cleveland, having an illegitimate child. And they would chant, "Ma, Ma, where's my pa?" He still won, but they were trying to smear him in that campaign just because of that. And they had no proof that any of it was real, although he still won. getting through those. The one I brought up the most, and just thinking about this, and I know there's more, but I think this was probably the one that probably stands out to us in most recent and horrible history, was the Jewish Holocaust. And you think that gossip and rumors played a critical and pervasive part in the Jewish Holocaust. They served to fuel anti-Semitic hatred, justifying escalating persecution, and facilitate the mechanics of the genocide at both the state and individual levels. So the role of gossip and rumors can be broken down into several different key points. So it's stated sponsored rumors and propaganda. The Nazi regime, led by Joseph Goebbels, Ministry of Propaganda. Propaganda in and of itself is just slander, gossip, rumors, stuff to stir up trouble. Can we agree on that? So he was a ministry of lies. That's what he was. Ministry of propaganda. He's a ministry of lies. Essentially, weaponized rumor and disinformation to manipulate the public. The stab in the back myth. A key rumor after World War I was that German Jews had conspired with foreign powers to undermine the war effort, leading to Germany's defeat. The Nazis used this baseless accusation to scapegoat Jews for Germany's post-war problems. Dehumanization. State propaganda. Newspapers like the Der Stimmler Films radio broadcast spread malicious gossip and stereotypes portraying Jews as subhuman, dangerous, carriers of disease like typhus, or part of an international conspiracy. So this systematic dehumanization made it easier for ordinary people to accept discrimination and violence against Jewish neighbors. Disguising genocide. The Nazis used euphemisms like evacuation or resettlement when deporting Jews. This official deception, reinforced by rumors of jobs and new lives in the East, sowed doubt and confusion among both the victims and potential bystanders, making it hard for people to believe the truth about the death camps. Local gossip and informing. At the community level, informal communication, suspicion, and personal grudges often manifested as harmful gossip and denunciations. There were informer networks, and going through informer networks that informed the Gestapo about the Jews. Acquiescence and complicity. This one got me. It said, gossip about Jewish neighbors reinforced the idea that they were different or enemies of the state, which led to many Germans passively accept anti-Jewish laws and discrimination. So you finally got everybody on board. We're all together in this. We're all going to just hate the Jews. And then by profit motives, things that they could profit from by either by stealing things. You know, if you've seen many movies, stuff like that, you know, the Jews, they did have possessions, they did have money. Well, they just took all of it. They took all the things that they had. Creating moral blindness. So the constant drumbeat of negative state-sanctioned gossip and rumors created a form of moral blindness in many people. It normalized hatred and exclusion, making the eventual mass murder seem like a logical, necessary solution to a Jewish problem that the rumors had created in the first place. You might know, or just off the top of your head, how many were killed, how many were murdered. And we're just talking about the Jewish people. The neighborhood of 6 million that were put to death. So, thinking about the sins we talked about, the gossip was sitting there right in the middle of, and that it was associated with, the gossip actually caused. And you could probably take every one of the things that we listed in Romans and apply it to every bit of what we're talking about right here in one instance. All of them were displayed just in the Jewish Holocaust. You can list them all down. It all started from just spreading rumors. spreading things, spreading lies about people, and causing unrest amongst people. So why? We come back to that question of why. Why would we do such things? Why would, we enter into it when it's such a powerful motivator toward evil, toward undoing? And you think about just within our walls here, we have a huge family here all together. Come here Sunday morning, we have around 200 people. We're all different walks of life. We're all different families. We got made up of many married couples in here. Very, very people coming in of just different interest, different look. And the urge to talk about people is always there. It's like we cannot help ourselves, but we got to try. We got to do something to do better. The next whole chapter talking about the consequences of sin starts out with just talking about relationships and what that means, to us. You think about, it outlines really specifically and hones in toward, marriage relationships. Now, I brought you up this one that says gossip and divorce. Look at how much time we got here. I can't tell by that clock. All right, about 10 minutes. Gossip leading to divorce. It's nothing new within a congregation. In the 30-some-odd years I've been here, people have gotten divorced. It happens. But what happens when that starts occurring is what we talk about while it's happening. But we're thinking about, too, within ourselves, within our own marriages, and destroying ourselves from within, those kinds of things. We said how gossip leads to divorce. So the erosion of trust and intimacy. You get to the point that you just don't trust the person you're with. So marriage, requires a high degree of privacy and confidentiality. When one partner badmouths the other to friends or to family, they betray that confidence. How many people have you heard and at work, you can show a hand, be at work, and somebody talk about their spouse while at work? I have. Do you ever engage? Not to talk about their spouse, but to talk about your own. Oh, yeah, mine does the same thing. I'm getting grins, but it's like, but you think about that. You're sitting there, it's supposed to be a very innocent kind of thing, but we're listening, and we're like, well, let's just get involved too. Yeah, mine does the same thing. And you just keep on talking about it. But you shouldn't be doing those kinds of things. You shouldn't be putting down your spouse in front of others, even though she doesn't know it or he doesn't know it at home. External interference. Discussing marital problems with third parties who are not trained counselors often complicates matters. Friends and family form negative opinions about the spouse that persist long after the couple has resolved the issue between themselves. They're focused on negativity. Regular complaining about a spouse is gossipy. Manner trains the brain to focus on negative aspects of the marriage. This builds contempt. Emotional distance and resentment. So the partner being gossiped about will eventually feel attacked, unsupported, leading to emotional detachment. Resentment builds because issues are being aired publicly rather than confronted directly with the relationship, making divorce seem like the only viable option. But I turn around and say, how does gossip lead to divorce? Well, then it's how does divorce lead to gossip? And that's what we're talking about in here. I'm not going into deep detail. Everybody, and I asked Tim Jefferson one time about, talking about his, relationship with Donna and what happened there. There was speculation even then of what was happening. It was brought to the elders. It was brought to us. And we went and talked with Tim. Got him first place. We couldn't talk with Donna. She wouldn't come to us. But there were things around, and Tim was not coming to church. Why? He felt embarrassed. He felt embarrassed that his marriage fell apart. That was a huge thing for him. He was very embarrassed. He finally started coming back. Right now he hadn't been here because he's got some hip issues, he's got some pain issues at home. He's kind of homebound at the moment. But he was very embarrassed, because he knew things were being said. He knew things were being talked about. Donna spread a lot of that stuff, and it just kind of, fireball in such a way. The person who needed to be talked to was Tim himself, But we had that one. That one was kind of highlighted here. People knew about it. But it comes there, this part says seeking validation and allies. People going through a divorce are often hurt and insecure. They may use gossip as a way to control the narrative, seeking sympathy and validation from their social network. They attempt to justify their decision by sharing negative details about their ex-spouse to build a support system and form alliances. A shift in social norms. So when a divorce occurs within a social circle, it challenges existing norms about marriage. Discussions and gossip about the event can lead friends of the couple to reevaluate their own relationships, making them more likely to consider divorce themselves. Well, if it's okay there, it's okay with me too. I don't like my spouse as much as I thought I did. Maybe that's the remedy. Lack of privacy. In traditional court proceedings, divorce details often become part of public record, providing ample material for speculation and gossip. So, they went to court, Tim and Donna. It's all public record. You can go find out about it, read about it, see what the court decision was, all about it. And although the facts are right in front of you, it still leads to the fact, there must be something underlying here. I have a feeling I know more about this than the judge did, whatever that may be. And then community interest. Divorce is a significant life event that is outside the norm. People naturally have a voyeuristic nature and curiosity about why relationships fail, which fuels discussion and gossip among those who know the couple. The affected individual often becomes the subject of conversation for some time. The other one I brought up here is talking about gossip in the church. Destroys unity and sows discord. And a lot of the same things that are listed in here, you can turn back onto the marriage part of it in divorce. Destroys unity and sows discord. Same thing with your marriages. Erodes trust, damages reputations, and hurts individuals. Hinders spiritual growth and ministry effectiveness. Even with our marriages, you're talking about things like that. If we're not treating our spouses the way we're supposed to, if I'm not loving Jay the way I should, my worship is hindered. My prayers could even be hindered, as it says. Weakens the church's witness to the world. We have got so many people coming in these doors. New people almost every Sunday, seems like, that we haven't seen before. And they get to knowing us, they get to having relationships with us, but then they hear the little whispers in the corner about whatever. if that's something that you experienced and knew of, would you want to be here? You know, what are they going to talk about me? I'm brand new. You know, were they going to figure out something that they can talk about with somebody else? And think about what it means outside of these walls once we leave here. Thank you very much for your kind attention.